Alrighty, let's get started here. Hi, everyone. So we're live, and I hope that you're having all a great morning so far. I'm Pauline, HR Content Specialist at Factorial, and thanks for tuning in to today's webinar on human connectedness. So elevating your employee experience. So before we get started, I wanted to give you a quick overview of what we do here at Factorial. Monte, next slide, please. Perfect. So we're an HR software company focused on empowering people teams to streamline almost every aspect of their work, actually. So we offer systems for time and attendance, PTO, applicant tracking, performance reviews, onboarding, just to name a few of our product features. So if you'd like to speak with an expert, you can book it for today, 15 minutes of your time, to get to a little run through as to how exactly we can help you. So feel free to scan this QR code. I'll also put the link in the chat here. All right. Good. And also during this webinar, please comment everything through the Q&A. All right, so I am super excited about this topic for today. It's definitely something that affects us all. Today is for learning about how we as leaders can cultivate and nurture, strong interpersonal relationships and connections in the workplace. Something that might be really a focus point in most organizations. So we'll explore why this topic influences all players in any organization, and we'll provide you with actionable strategies that you can take away for you to implement in after. So that being said, I'm super excited to introduce you our valued speaker for today, Monte Williams. Hello, thank you for being here today.
Pleasure's all mine.
Monte wears many hats, including being the founder of Alu. It's a leadership development company. He's also a HR practitioner, a TEDx speaker, 2 times TEDx speaker, and of course, a visionary leader, which after getting to know him a bit better, I clearly see how firmly he believes that investing in people holds the key to solving any challenge in the world. So we're in for a great presentation for today. Monte, do you want to take it away from here?
100%. 100%. Again, thank you, Factorial and Pauline, for having me. I always get super excited when I have the opportunity to speak about such a topic like human connectedness. It's a little background about me. I've been in the business of human capital and investing in people for close to 20 years at this point. I kind of chipped my teeth in the startup space. I've worked my way through various different pieces of the business world, ops, sales, tech, you name it. And the one thing that remains consistent, regardless of the industry, regardless of the company, regardless of what stage of their growth the company is in, is that there is always a genuine need and desire to want to improve performance and increase revenue. And the way that I see the best companies in the world do it, and the way that I've implemented some of those strategies, is through this idea of human connectedness, right? And in my mind, it's an equation, and it is HE plus HC equals M squared. And what that means is happy employees plus happy customers equals more money for the organizations, more money for the teams, more money for yourselves. And so my primary focus is to focus on how we elevate the employee experience. So in order to demonstrate that, I'd like to take everybody on a journey today to talk about an experience, how I learned the value of human connectedness, and how I helped an organization learn the value of human connectedness and the actual tactics that we put in place to transform the culture of the organization and also transform the performance of the organization. So when going way, way back at the beginning of my career, I had the opportunity to do some independent consulting. And I was transferred out to an organization in Minneapolis. And the the reason why they called me is because they said, Mont, we have a problem, but we don't know what it is. We know that employees are not as happy as they could be. We know that employees are not giving us their everything. They're not as productive as they can be. And, when you walk around the office, it just doesn't feel like a place that I want to work. And so we'd like you to come in and get a feel for what's going on and see if you can help us fix it and diagnose it. So I'm always open for a challenge, and I believe that every problem in the world can be solved through an investment in people. And so where I started in this journey is we had to find the root cause. And whenever you're building a culture, transforming it, whether it's for performance reasons or whatever it may be, the way that you do that is you talk to the people that you're building the culture for. Because talking to the people that you're building the culture for will ensure that you are hitting the things that not just matter to you in an arbitrary way, but matter to the organization and matter to the people that are driving the organization. So I started, for context, this company was about 150 to 200 people. And over the course of the first month or so, I spoke to about 75% of the entire organization. And as I entered into month two, I had a solid feel for what was going on, what the issue was, and how to fix it. And now it was time to present this to the people that brought me in. And ironically, they kind of served it up on a platter for me. So let me set the stage for you for a second. So I walked into this boardroom after about a month and a half, ready to present my findings. And I walk into this boardroom, and there is a gentleman that I had never seen before. He's sitting all the way in the corner, and he's very preoccupied with his phone. He didn't look up, he didn't do anything like that. So as the meeting gets started, ironically, he is the first person to speak. And without looking up, without saying hello, without um, without engaging anybody, he says, "So you're the person we hired to fix this, huh? How bad is it? And do you know what the problem is?" So I was kind of taken aback at his approach, and I said, "Hi, my name is Monte. How are you? How's your day going?" And he said, "Listen, I don't have time for meaningless small talk. Do you know what the problem is or not? And can you fix it?" And I took a minute and I said, "I do." I looked him directly in the eyes and I said, "Yes, I do know what the problem is." And he kind of smirks and goes, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "Well, the issue is that your organization," after I took a minute, right? Um, I said, "The issue is that your organization doesn't believe in meaningless small talk. You don't believe in it. Just a reflection of what you said. And as a result, your people feel like employees instead of humans." So he kind of looks at me, he goes, "What's the problem with them feeling like employees? That's exactly what they are." And I said, "Well, actually, they're human first, employee second. And the problem is by making them feel just like employees, you are ignoring the human element of who they are as a person. And it's impossible to maximize the potential of an employee if you don't maximize what it is to be human within that employee." And everybody is kind of looking around, but everybody is dead silent. And I said, "Does that resonate with you?" And so he says, "You know, I don't know what to tell you. And I broke the silence by saying, if you want to fix it, if you want to fix this experience, you have to elevate the employee experience. It's very important that you elevate the employee experience. But the way you elevate the employee experience is that you have to personalize it. Like, think about anything. When you think about the clothes that fit the best and things like that, you don't just buy them off the rack at the biggest size. You say, okay, this is what size fits me. This is where it fits me. This is how I'm shaped. All of those things. It's a very personal experience. And I explained that you cannot elevate the employee experience without personalizing it. So the real question I asked the gentleman is, how badly do you want to fix it? And this was the moment that I think the breakthrough kind of happened. Kind of took his glasses off. He had did one of these and he sighed and he says, I want to fix it, but I have no clue on how personalizing and making the experience more human is going to improve this. And I explained to him, I said, listen, business relationships and personal relationships, they operate on the same principles. What yields success in one yields success in the other because people drive both. So if you acknowledge that and you just consider it, then if you deal with the person, that you deal with your employee the same way that you would deal with a human, with a person that is not your employee, and you instill the same sorts of values and you create the connection and the relationship from the same way, then that is what's going to ultimately yield success. And he said, okay, I get it. I get it. This makes sense. We had some other small talk at that point, and then I took them through the process of personalizing the employee experience so that we could elevate it. And it's a three-step process that anybody can implement, and I will take you through it now. So the when you are trying to personalize the human experience and the employee experience, the first step is to actively improve the level of human connectedness between you and your teammates. And this may seem counterintuitive. You may say, well, why aren't you starting with the problems of the business? Or why aren't you starting with the KPIs that are being missed or the revenue that we're not generating? And the reason why you start with improving the level of human connectedness is because without the humans that are there as your employees, you cannot fix the KPIs, generate more revenue, and push the organization forward. So the first step to personalizing the employee experience is to improve the level of human connectedness. So let's get into what human connectedness is, right? So the the human connectedness by definition, when an individual is actively engaged with another person, activity, object for their well-being, meaning when they are doing something and interacting with somebody, but it makes them feel good, secure, um, makes them feel connected. What happens is if you take the time to understand whether you are connected with the humans as employees or not, you can better understand where the gaps are and how to fix them. And I introduced the organization to a system, and it's called the PUG. And the PUG is an acronym for Personal User Guide. And what we did was I took the leaders first and I coached them on how to take their teams through this idea of a personal user guide to improve the level of human connectedness. And this is something that, again, anybody can implement. So when you talk about this idea of the personal user guide, what is it? Ultimately, when you think back to buying anything, so a computer or a TV, a piece of furniture, anything, there's always a set of instructions that are there that say, this is how it works. You can do this. You should stay away from that. You should try this. There's always a set of instructions that are there. And if you think about it, we as people, we expect those instructions. We look for that little booklet or that little piece of paper that's there to say, how do you operate this thing? And what the personal user guide is it is a set of instructions for us as humans so that we can better understand how we operate both as individuals and how we want to operate with one another. And it covers a couple of different areas, right? So, first and foremost, value system. What values are most important to you? This is it, and it's very important to note that when you go through the personal user guide and this list of questions, it's a mutual exchange because vulnerability begets vulnerability. So you can't just ask the question to your teammates and then not share the answers yourself, right? It has to be a mutual exchange. So the first question that we get into is about values, and you start to ask the teammates, what values are most important to you? And you also share with them what values what the values that you value the most as well, right? Because from a baseline perspective, we all have a set of values that drive our lives, right? And when you are working with your teammates, colleagues, senior level executives, this kind of transcends level, right? It's more so about understanding who is the person that I'm dealing with and what values kind of govern how they operate. So this is the first question. Next question, communication style. How do you like people to communicate with you? This is how we get so much of our businesses done and how we accomplish so much of our goals, so many of our goals through communication. But think about it. How often do we take the time to understand the communication style of the people that we're communicating with? How often do we take time to explain our communication style to people and how we like to be communicated with? Some people like to pick up the phone and have a 5-minute conversation. Some people want everything written down via email. Some people you can't talk to unless you have a deck prepared. One isn't better than the other, but just understand that as you understand people's communication styles, it helps to build a level of connectedness that you have with one another. Next, decision making. This is very important when you, especially from a leadership perspective, when you explain to your team how you make decisions and when you understand how and why your teammates make the decisions that they make. The idea here is empathy. You give people an opportunity to see things from your perspective, and you get an opportunity to see things from theirs when it comes to making just business decisions in general. Next, support. What ways do you feel the best supported? This is the question. We're starting to get into this idea of creating the psychological safety, and this is one of the questions that kind of kicks that off, right? In what ways do your teammates feel the best supported? Do you know? In what ways do you feel best supported by your teammates? Because that matters as well. If you're the type of leader that says, I feel best supported by my teammates when they never miss a deadline, your teammates have to know that. If your teammates are the type that say, I feel best supported by my leader when they give me the trust and empower me to do the job and don't check up on me 50 times before the due date, then that's also something that you need to know and you need to understand, right? So next, boundaries. What will you not tolerate in others? What will you not tolerate in others? This is a gentle way of understanding where the no-fly zones are. Everybody has them, right? So what are the no-fly zones for your teammates? What are the no-fly zones for yourself? Whenever I go through this exercise personally, one of the things that I always say, I don't tolerate rudeness. It's a no-fly zone for me. Because in my mind and based on my value system and how I think about things, as leaders, we should always care enough to find a nice way to communicate whatever the message is. There's no excuse to be rude, right? So But asking these questions, again, it helps to understand the boundaries from both perspectives. Next, recognition. This is huge. What is the preferred method of recognition? Because you could think that by resurrecting a statue in honor of your teammates for doing a great job, that that's exactly what they want, when in actuality, they just want a Slack message that says thank you and I appreciate it. There's other people that say, I do want you to resurrect the statue towards to everything that I've done, and they want, public recognition, and you never give them that. You only tell it to them in private. So understanding the preferred method of recognition becomes very important, because this is one of the low to no cost ways of keeping teammates and people engaged in their roles day in and day out. This costs nothing. It doesn't have to cost anything to understand it and to really recognize people in the way that they want to be recognized. Arguably the most important question here: when do you feel you are your most authentic self? When do you feel you are your most authentic self? It is important for your teammates to understand when you feel you are your most authentic self. And that is not just within the confines of work. Very important here. This is an opportunity to open up a little bit, right? One of the things that I share when asked this question, I feel like my most authentic self when one of the places is when I'm engineering music. That's one of the things that I do in my pastime. So when I have the opportunity to sit down and just bring all of the instruments to life and put them in the right frequencies, it's one of the places where I feel my most authentic self. You might be thinking, why would you ever share something like that during one of these conversations? And the reason why you share things like that is because it makes the person say, oh, I didn't even know you were into that. I know somebody who was, or I'm into it, and it starts to create another possible place for you to build a connection, right? So asking the question about when you feel you are your most authentic self, and asking that to your teammates as well, very important, because it gives you an idea of the type of environment they feel they can be the best in. And last, what's the life philosophy? Like, what do they really, really believe? How do they want to live their life? And this is one of, when you think about employee retention, when you think about career growth and development, these things come into play, especially the life philosophy, because if over time your teammates are operating, or the organization is operating in a philosophy that doesn't align with the teammate, over time you will lose that teammate. Right? So understanding what philosophy they live by, what philosophy you live by, it gives them access to understand how you lead, when you lead, why you lead, and also how you live as a person. Right? So these are the questions that you can ask any teammate, any colleague, if you're looking to build a relationship. And these are and improve the level of human connectedness. And these are the questions that you should answer to your colleagues, to your teammates, so that they can understand who you are as a person. So I took the organization through that. We started meeting with all of the leaders, and I showed them how to go through it. And the experience that we had from just going through the 2 or 3 hour session to go through these questions and really facilitate the conversation across the leaders, there were so many more similarities than differences throughout the conversation. By the time we got to the end of this exercise, people had exchanged numbers that never exchanged numbers before. They were making plans to go do things because they found that they both like to golf, or they both like to bowl, or they both have mutual friends and things like that. All of those things started to happen as a result of this. And then they started to take their teams through it. And over time, it started to, the office and the organization started to feel, quote unquote, feel a little different. But that tangible feeling that everybody was feeling was because we had improved the level of human connectedness over a series of weeks and exercises. The next step we did was we went into one-on-one meetings and how to optimize one-on-one meetings with individual teammates. And I believe that one-on-one meetings are one of the biggest missed opportunities to form a connection and elevate the human experience, right? So when you think about it, the idea of optimizing your one-on-one meetings, I like to start from a place of let's take inventory. Let's take inventory on if you have a high level of human connectedness or if you have a low level of human connectedness. And you can take inventory by asking yourself the series of questions that are here and putting them into a survey. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But the questions are, one, frequency. How often are you meeting with your teams? Are you conducting your one-on-ones? Is it bi-weekly? Is it monthly? How often are you doing it? Is it weekly? Right? It's a, I like to ask this question because people say, well, I meet with my team all the time. I meet with them, a couple times a week, and I go, fantastic. Other people say, well, I only meet with them, when I need to. So I say, you should always examine the frequency with which you meet with your team. If you need a baseline recommendation, I always recommend weekly. Always, always, always. Because life changes so much. And bi-weekly, sometimes there's too much change that's happened and it opens up an opportunity to not be synced up and aligned with the teammate. And monthly, the world can change in a month, right? So what you talked about, the goals, the priorities, everything can change. So I always recommend weekly. But the people who say, no, I meet with my team all the time, the next question I say is, well, do you talk about their well-being as a person or do you just talk about business? And this is the opportunity. This is the big opportunity because and right now my number is somewhere around 80%, 80 to 85% of this organization. When I ask them about do they talk about their well-being, 80 to 85% of them said, no, I mean, they came to work, they're fine. I'm trying to, talk about the goals. I'm trying to talk about the KPIs. I'm trying to talk about, why they didn't do X, Y, and Z. But think about this for a second. You have a person in front of you that you're meeting with on a one-to-one. We spend more time at work than we do with our families. And you don't know how they're doing as a person, how they feel. So it's very important to analyze if you are asking or making the time to talk about their well-being.
And
Right.
just to jump in there, that's something coming into Factorial where my manager started asking me that question, but I was like taken aback. I was like, why are you asking me this? Because I wasn't used to being asked that question in our one-on-one meetings. So that was, but it's super helpful and it helps form, that bond beyond just manager to employee. And it helps me open up more.
Yes.
And like form that transparent type of relationship. So yeah, I think that is a super good point to make.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Pauline. Thank you so much for sharing it because the feeling that you described in that journey, that is what typically happens. It's why are you asking me this? And then it becomes well, wait, do you care about me and the work I do? Oh, wow. That is a feeling. And that idea of caring about the idea that your leader cares about not just the work you do, but you as a person, that many times is the difference between whether somebody stays at an organization or goes away from an organization, even if there's more money involved, because you can go to an organization that gives you more money, but will they care about me in the same way? Will they be as vested in my future in the same way? So thank you so much for sharing that, Pauline. Appreciate it. The next piece is interest and fulfillment. Do you discuss what interests them about their roles, right? And the current level of fulfillment? I like to ask this question often because interests change, levels of fulfillment change, these things change on the regular. So making time during your one-on-ones to ask about, what they're interested in, how happy they are, how fulfilled they are in their roles. Is there anything else that you can do or they can do to make them feel more fulfilled? Extremely important. Next, career goals. How often do you ask them about their both short-term and long-term career goals? I call it, what do you want to be when you grow up? And when we start that conversation, I follow up on it, it becomes well, do you still want to be there? Are we still in line? How do we get you there? But the career goals conversation and asking about this shows the teammate that you're vested in them in their future. Challenges. This is huge. Do you create a safe enough space for your teammates to open up and tell you what they're struggling with? Or are they afraid to? Because they see, oh, I can't get it done, or I'm struggling as a sign of weakness or a sign of failure. So opening up the conversation so that there's a different level of connectedness so that they feel comfortable enough to say, here's what I'm struggling with, here's what's taking the most time, and here's what I can use your assistance with. Really important. And the last question, feedback. Do you offer an opportunity and extend the olive branch for them to give you feedback about how you can be better for them? How you can be better for them. In the one-on-one conversation, there's always, it's like implicitly implied that if you need to give feedback to your teammate, you're going to give it to them in the one-on-one. All teammates feel that. All employees feel that. But how often do we create a space where we can say to our team, what do you need from me? How can I help support you in a different way? The question that I like to ask directly is, what do you need more of from me? What do you need less of from me? And this is a conversation that I ask at the end of every one-on-one with every team. And I started talking through this concept with the leaders at this organization. And then I took all of these questions and I put them into the survey. And I said, and here's what it looks like. And you can do this for all of the questions. You have your scale 0 to 4, 0 being the lowest, 4 being, 0 being never, 4 being always. And then you start to answer all of the questions. And it's how often, and this is just an example, but how often do you conduct one-on-ones with members of your team? If you say 0 times or zero, if you say never, then it's you get a 0. If you say sometimes, then it's 2. If you say always or often, then you get this. And after you go through all of the questions, what happens is if you get a score of 18 or greater, then you can suffice to say that there's a relatively strong level of human connectedness there because you're doing all of those things that we talked about on the previous slide, often to always. If you score less than 17, then there's this idea that there's an opportunity to improve the level of human connectedness, right? And that means that you probably could be doing some things more often, right? So for context, when I took the team through this part of it and we started to do these actual surveys, out of the leaders, over 80% of the leaders were scoring over here. And they said, oh my goodness, I just didn't recognize that we were missing all of these things during our conversations. So with that said, we kind of went through it and then we started to course correct the one-on-one meetings. So I took them through the PUG and the personal user guide to improve the level of human connectedness. When we got to that point, we specifically talked about optimizing one-on-one meetings so that they can be more in tune with what's going on with their teammates and how they can help. And then the last step, and for many organizations, it's the scariest step. It's solicit direct feedback. Solicit the feedback, ask the questions, right? And when I took the organization through it, my first statement was, if you ask for feedback, you gotta be ready to receive it. You gotta be ready to handle what comes back when you ask for feedback, right? So there's different levels of feedback, and I want to take you through both of them. So the first level, micro, and we just kind of went into it, but the one-on-one meetings. And the question again that I like to ask here is, what do you need more of from me or less of from me as your leader? What can I do to support you? What is working and what is not working for you? But the challenge here, team, is you have to be ready to receive the information, and you have to be willing to be consistent with asking that question. I remember there was an experience where I had a teammate, and when I asked this question, what do you need more of or less of from me? For 7 weeks straight, teammate never said anything. Week 8, I asked the question, and they said, well, there is this one thing. And I bring this example up because that's what you're waiting for. You're waiting for them to build up the courage to actually express something. And that is the moment where you can create a deeper connection, and it can happen in a moment. And it's all based on how you react and respond to that feedback. Because if somebody gives you feedback and you immediately get defensive, you make excuses and you explain it away, they're never going to give you feedback again. Because what you've shown is that you're not in a position to receive it. And that puts a wall up. Likewise, if you ask the question and they give you feedback and you say, I hear you. Thank you for giving me this feedback. I will think about how I can implement it. And you start to ask more questions to understand why they feel the way they feel. You've immediately created a connection, because what you've shown is that you're open to receive feedback, and you're open to do things in a way that is not just your way, but you're open to doing what's best for the greater whole, right? The next piece is macro, employee surveys. Now, slippery slope here. I personally, I love employee surveys, because I believe that employee surveys create what I like to call a release valve, which is they create a place for employees to get it all out. Right? They can truly give you their perspective on not how you believe the organization is, not what you think the culture is, but they give you the actual data behind how it's translating, which is what really matters. And you're able to get that through employee surveys. Now, best way to implement employee surveys, make them anonymous. The anonymity in the employee surveys is what creates the psychological safety. That psychological safety is what allows the real issues to bubble up to the top, right? The risk here is, if you do employee surveys on a macro level, you have to be prepared to take action and report back to the organization. And depending on where you are in your journey, you may not be able to do that. But even if you can't do it on a macro level for the entire organization, I always recommend creating a safe enough space, even on a departmental level or business unit level, where you can have surveys, create the space where people can give feedback so that you can understand in an objective way their experience. It's not about right or wrong. It's about the organization taking a moment, the leader taking a moment to understand the experience of the team and the employees through their eyes. instead of what the organization wants to say, right? So after I took, it took a minute. We got the micro meetings and we got that going. And the last step of transforming this organization was the employee surveys. And what we got from the employee surveys was we should have done them at the end. We should have done them at the beginning and the end, right? But at the beginning, the organization wasn't comfortable doing it. So we only did it at the end of this whole journey. And when we did the employee surveys at the end, there was so much, I've experienced so much change. I've experienced so many, my leaders are more personal with me. I feel more understood. I feel more connected to the organization. It was a ton of positive feedback. And they also felt safe enough to say, but we also want to see X, right? So soliciting the direct feedback on both a micro and a macro level became an integral piece of the overall process. So the key takeaways of how we transformed the organization, because the end of the story was after me being there for about 4 to 5 months, the organization that I walked into was not the organization that I left. It was more together. There was a different sense of camaraderie. There was a different level of human connectedness because the employees felt more like the experience was more tailored to them. They felt like the organization actually cared and that they were listening to them and that there was a level of value there, right? Now, here's how it benefits the organization. After we did this work, in the 6 months after, the 2 quarters after, they had the 2 most successful quarters that they had in the history of the organization. They made the most revenue and they also experienced the least amount of turnover because of the work that we all did together, right? Now, ultimately, when you looked at how that was done, it was some key takeaways. First, it was understanding that employees are human first and employee second, not vice versa. You can't ignore the human element of your teammates because the human element is what makes them the teammates that you hired and the teammates that are doing the work, right? Next, recognize the value of human connectedness and this idea that if you stay connected with them as humans, you build a better relationship. You build a better relationship, then you open up the door for so much more success, right? Next, create the psychological safety. If you're able to create psychological safety within your organization, you will truly start to understand where the real problems and the real struggles, not just for the teammates, but for the customers as well. Because psychological safety, it's not like there's this idea where you create it for one portion of the organization, not the other. When there's psychological safety, and now that opens up a freer flow of information for everything, both the employee experience and the customer experience. Next, you understand your teammates as individuals, not just a number, not just checking a box. These are people with feelings that have their own goals and things that they want to accomplish. And the more that we as leaders and organizations are more in tune with that, the better we can meet their needs, the longer they'll stay with us, the harder they'll work for us, the more productive they'll be, and then everybody benefits from that. Optimize your one-on-one meetings. If there's anything, if you take nothing else from this idea of optimizing your one-on-one meetings and making sure that you use it as a dedicated touch point to make sure that the human that is driving that employee is okay, that's an amazing starting point. Just optimize the meeting. If you don't want to do it on a macro level or you're not in a position to do it, we as leaders have full control of this piece. And it all starts with a conversation. How are you? I want to know what's going on with you. How can I support you? And lastly, solicit feedback directly. don't, the old saying is, if you dish it, you got to be willing to take it. And so the idea here is, if as leaders, you become so much more valuable to your team when you have the courage to solicit feedback from them and ask them what you can do better for them. What do they need more of from you? What do they need less of from you? So that was the journey. That was the conversation. That was my time with this organization. And I've repeated this process countless times throughout the years, because the idea of it is the process doesn't change because people are always involved, right? So this is an actionable, repeatable process that can be done. Sometimes you can do it within your employees. Sometimes you need somebody external to do it based on the severity of the situation and where you are in your employee journey. But again, the process doesn't change. If there are any questions, I am more than willing to answer them. But we're coming up on time, so that's my time.
Great. I loved those takeaways because, as you said, they're actionable and they don't require taking, finances out of the budget or having to speak to upper management, about the approval. Like, as a leader, you're really in the place to be reminded of those, key like takeaways. So thank you for that. Any questions? Otherwise, I got one, but I will wait to see if anyone's typing away in the Q&A. All right.
Okay.
In the meantime, while people are thinking about their questions, I have a question for you. So what are your thoughts on the future of human connectedness? Do you perceive a growing trend awareness among leaders to, cultivate these relationships or within their organizations, but do they see it as sustainable in the long run?
So I think that we as a society and in the business world, I think that we're starting to pay more attention to this idea of
Mhm.
human connectedness and the value of it. I believe that it takes more work than people originally believe that than people think that it should, right? This idea of human connectedness is not something that is you do it once and that's it, right? It's very much like getting into the fitness world. It becomes a lifestyle when you do it, right? So I think, and the challenge that we're having is that the the lead time on the ROI of investing that type of time in the team, it's so long. It takes so much time, and many organizations um, don't have that type of time or believe that they don't have that type of time. So I believe the adoption of this idea of human connectedness, we're getting there, but we're just not there yet because we haven't been able to fully realize, or people believe that we haven't been able to realize the true ROI. But if you actually just look at the most successful companies, right? And the companies that generate the most revenue. And you really start to dig into their culture, their values, and talking to the people and why those people stay there and all of those things. It's evident. It's evident. These are the things that those organizations are doing and the leaders in those organizations are doing to keep things going. It's just a matter of everybody being willing to do that type of work, if that makes sense. So the last thing I'll say is I really appreciated everybody's time. If anybody wants to stay in touch, you can scan this. It goes to my LinkedIn. You can feel free to connect with me, ask me any questions that you have about this. But otherwise, I really appreciated my time. Pauline, thank you so much. Factorial, thank you so much. Always excited to talk about such a relevant topic.
Thank you. Really appreciate it too. And I think that you left us all with a profound sense of motivation to really implement these actionable principles in our organization. So thank you for shaping the future leaders of tomorrow.
There is a question that's here. Hold on. I'll answer it live. In your experience, have businesses that you've helped have an HR department or rep have businesses that you've helped have an HR department or rep? Is HR being prioritized as an org chart across the board? Great question. I've helped businesses that both have an HR team and don't have an HR team, right? The businesses that have HR teams, those conversations are more so around how to implement this and how to get the leaders buy-in to do it, to explain the importance of these processes. On the businesses that don't have an HR team, more times than not, I'm reached out to by one of the senior level executives that is just saying, hey, I'm missing something, either the COO or the CEO, that says, hey, we're missing something here. I sense that there's a piece of culture that's missing, or there's something that we don't have right now. And I need somebody to focus on it because I have to focus on, building the business in a different way. So that's the HR department versus the rep piece. And is HR being prioritized on org charts across the board? Depends on the organization. I think that if I was to go back, 10 or 15 years, I would say not so much, right? It was more of a, the saying was people should act like adults and people should know what to do. And I think that we've evolved past that point where HR now, for a lot of legal reasons, diversity reasons, things like that, like HR is very much a prioritized part of organizations. But the thing I would say there is whether the HR department is prioritized in the organization or not, it depends on what is their mission and what is their purpose. Is the HR department that's being prioritized just to protect the organization, or is the HR that's being prioritized there to actually be a voice for the employees and bridge the gap between one set of teammates and another set of teammates, or the executive and the leaders and the teammates, while protecting the assets of the organization? So I think that's the question that you really have to ask when talking about the prioritization of HR. But great question.
All right, great. Any other questions? I provided Monte's LinkedIn in the chat here for you to connect with him. And yeah, that wraps it up. Thank you, Monte, again, and everyone for taking time out of your day to join us. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you all at our upcoming webinars.
Awesome. Take care.
All right. Have a good one, everyone. Thank you, Monte.
Bye-bye.
Bye.